Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Josh here. So, again, yesterday, day before, I was a little bit lazy, didn't upload any videos. Um, I'm trying to get in the swing of things. It's just a little bit tough sometimes, and I'm lazy, and editing's kind of a pain in the butt, so sometimes I don't really have the will to do it. Also, sleep schedule's a little bit messed up. I'm usually up till like 6 in the morning, and I kind of thought starting to feel like if I'm recording these videos at around 5 or 6 in the morning, it's kind of doesn't really count as a daily wrap up, right? Because that's kind of pushing into the next day. But regardless, I'm going to go ahead and get this one started off. So today's news was honestly a little bit boring, not really too much. I kind of checked periodically throughout the day, not too many huge breakouts, but um, kind of some inferences into the GOP not being quite done overhauling Obamacare, which I would pray to God that they're not going to stop doing because it desperately needs to be done. There are going to be two things that I want to kind of start outlining in this video. The first one is going to be all the talk about Trump team ties to Russia, Russian interference in the election, et cetera, et cetera. Um, that's like the main one, so I'll go ahead and get that kind of started first, of course. Kind of that, and then also, secondly, the just a little bit of the corruption at the Democratic level. Just in general, I think this is something that I've wanted to talk about for a while, and it's something I am very interested in discussing. And this is in regards to specifically the highest levels of the Democratic Party, up to the presidency, the DNC, things like that. Just overall kind of sleaziness and hypocrisy within that party. So I'll definitely discuss a little bit of that. But first, ties with Russia. I just want to be very clear. I believe there is a possibility that Russia had some sort of a um, interest in this election. I think that Vladimir Putin had already had this just bad experiences with Hillary Clinton already, just as from her being Secretary of State. He's had bad experiences with President Obama. I think that for him and his country's well-being, he wanted Trump to win the election, and I think it is slightly possible that there could have been some campaign interference, maybe not necessarily campaign or election interference, more as um, efforts made to try to influence people for that. I guess you can consider that election interference, but in regards to all the stuff and stories about possible ties to Trump aides in Russia, coordinating him to win the election, I think all that's just a bunch of bogus. Stories have been being ran constantly, almost entirely by CNN with that. And generally, from what we've seen, there's almost been no evidence at all imposing any kind of charges like that. The only ones that were even had any kind of links in any possible way to Russia and anyone associated with Trump was Michael Flynn. And even then, if you actually go into that and you read into what had happened with him, it wasn't even anything that big of a deal. Like, the guy had had some meetings with Russian officials, but it was part of his job. And it's almost like I feel like at this point in time, if Trump goes and meets with Vladimir Putin, which he should eventually, it's a leader for a foreign country. It's going to be looked at as some sort of collusion. So it's just kind of a weird place we're in with that. But I mean, I don't see, and haven't seen any evidence that would suggest that Trump directly or anyone associated with his campaign had any coordination with Russia to get any of this stuff hacked. And of course, Trump made some comments during the campaign that he wants Russia to have all the emails released, blah blah blah. I think those are of course offhand comments. A lot of emails had already been released before he said things like that. I think it's just overall an ignorant thing to try to assume that he had some sort of like collusion with Russia within the election. Especially, I think it's kind of hypocrisy with saying that Trump has it says a lot of things that are kind of unfounded, which I think these claims are completely unfounded also. It's just kind of a narrative that they're trying to push really hard. So I just think it's an interesting one. And CNN's doing a good job of trying to portray that a lot. Now, the second part of it is I want to discuss a little bit about the Democratic Party and some of the corruption that just insanely high levels of corruption that I've seen, especially recently. And the first thing I'd like to start out with that is recently there was some stuff that came out about Hillary Clinton, some of her campaign aides that I thought was extremely interesting. And that being that in 2013, when Hillary Clinton left the State Department, she was Secretary of State in 2013 when she left, she managed somehow to keep the top level security clearance of the government not being in the State Department. It wasn't even just her and 6 of her aides. So somehow Hillary Clinton managed to keep top level security clearance while at the same time having 6 of her campaign, and this was throughout the election, keeping top level security clearance in our government throughout the entire election process for her and 6 of her campaign aides, or 6 of her State Department aides. And I think that just in and of itself is it's just completely insane. That paired up with, I think, another huge thing, and I think a lot of Democrats should be irritated at this as well, the fact that Hillary Clinton, or not, I'm sorry, not Hillary Clinton, the DNC that rigged the primaries against Bernie Sanders. And it's hilarious to me to see that, because it's this level of corruption that's within their own party, that their own party is colluding against other people in their party to force Hillary Clinton to even get the nomination in the first place, having rigged primaries. And it's just like, how can you even, as a Democrat, how can you stand behind someone? How can you stand behind a party that does that kind of stuff? It's just disgusting to me. All the stuff coming out about unmasking possible Trump cabinet members, and levels of basically saying that there's some sort of a high-profile person that was responsible, that was someone basically given that direction to basically do that, to surveil Trump and his associates during the election. Is just disgusting that our government would do something like that. And of course it's from the Democratic Party, and I think it's the hypocrisy, and it's really funny because that party is a party supposed to be of equality, fairness, all of that kind of stuff, and then they turn around and just completely hose each other over. I mean, how can you be someone that goes around, talks about fairness, talks about equality, talks about all that stuff, and then you're literally going to sit there and basically say, screw you, Bernie Sanders, you're a piece of ass, you don't deserve anything at all. Now, of course, there's arguments, I think, saying that there's no way Bernie Sanders would have got the nomination anyways, which I think is probably also true. CNN giving the questions to the debate to Hillary Clinton. Like, what kind of disgusting shit is that? It's hilarious. And you don't see, and the funny part about it is, if you saw that on the other side, it'd be everywhere. It'd blow up. There's no way, if someone had found out that CNN had given the questions to the debate to Donald Trump, he would have lost the election. It would have been blown up to that proportion. But it just kind of gets thrown under the rug when it's the other way around. And I mean, I'm not necessarily saying that things that are a little bit deceitful don't happen on both sides, but I think it's important to understand that it should be blown up either way. You don't just throw it under the rug because it's your own party. And that's the biggest thing I think that they need to work on with that. So it's an interesting one. Today, news wasn't really that great. Not very many major things happened. I did see they came out with audio from the gentleman that had actually, they found out that the truck driver that had killed those 13 elderly people outside of San Antonio had actually called. Somebody had actually called in and reported that truck a couple of times. Ended up following him to the crash and everything, so it was a really unfortunate scene. But they released the calls for that, and that was very interesting to hear. But other than that, I think it was overall a relatively slow day. I just wanted to kind of touch base on those couple of things because I thought that was a huge... I just thought it was something that was important to kind of wrap my mind around. Especially with the stuff recently, with all the intel and all the just deceit within that party that's been happening lately, it's just insane. And you don't see much news coverage of it at all other than from Fox. And, of course, when that information came about, if it wasn't really relayed through CNN at all, they don't even talk about it, just kind of pretend it doesn't exist. Just keep pushing out stories about the Trump-Russia narrative, all this stuff. So it's interesting. We'll see where it progresses from here. Judge Gorsuch is hopefully going to be confirmed by the Senate here soon. Another interesting thing, it's kind of obstructionist with the Democrats, whoever they are, not confirming Judge Gorsuch, which overall throughout his entire time as a judge has been extremely well represented. Everyone pretty much understands him as a very unifying judge. He makes decisions not based off personal opinion, political opinion, stuff like that. So he'll get confirmed. The people that don't confirm him are just silly. So But we'll go ahead and see what goes on from here. Tomorrow should be interesting, I hope. Past few days have been relatively boring, a little bit of hearsay, but overall it's a relatively boring day. But for now, I think got the day pretty much wrapped up as best I can. So gonna go ahead and wrap this one up and see you guys in the next video.